Hello, my name is Jason Miller, and today I'll be showing you the Invention Studio's Siser Romeo vinyl cutter. This is an example of a tool safety category 1.
In this section of the video, I'll be showing you how to use Leonardo Design Studio to lay out your vinyl sticker. Leonardo Design Studio is this red S icon here. You should be able to find it on the Craftland computers. Once it's up, the first thing you're going to do is go to the bottom left and click this Design tab. This pulls open our build mat, and on here we can lay out all of our components that we're planning to cut out. To pull in your image, you're first going to go to File, and then click Open, and you'll navigate to find the checklist image. In here, we have options for print and cut and background. Background is useful if you ever want to just have something that you're not necessarily cutting out, but you want to print as the background of something. So you could pull in a background image and then pull in a different thing that you're trying to cut on top of that background and use that in a print and cut operation. Print and cut is useful because it lets us mask out parts of the design that we don't necessarily want. So to illustrate that, I have print and cut selected, and I'll click Next here, and it pulls up this menu here. In here, we are going to use the advanced masking tools, select color range, to get rid of the white space in our design. So by selecting this and having remove selected, I can click this white, and you see all of the white disappears, leaving us with just the kiwi bird, ISGT, and gear. I can do the opposite by including it, or by messing with the color tolerance, we can start to see what this option really does. If I jack up the color tolerance a bunch and then click the black, you'll see that the gray disappears as well. That's because it is including everything close to the black, which includes that gray. You can actually see it updating as I change the tolerance there. Now, because I don't actually want to do that, I'm just going to click this Reset All button in the bottom right, and it'll go back to what it was before. I'll come back to Remove, go back to 40, which was the default, and I will remove the white. Very good. Now we have just what we want. Going next again, we see this menu here. On this menu, you can see these blue outlines around each shape showing us what Leonardo Design Studio believes we want to cut. For the most part, this is accurate, but you'll notice the inside of the eye and the eyebrow are not included. This is because of one of our masks here. A minimum contour area being at 25 is too much. This is actually a useful feature because it stops you from including like tiny specks that are sometimes a part of designs you find online, but are very difficult to cut out of vinyl. In our purposes though, this is too restrictive, so we're going to lower the minimum contour area until the eyebrow is included. You may have noticed that this line at the bottom got included as well. This is just an artifact of the way the background was removed, and we don't need to worry about it because we'll be able to remove it once I have actually finalized this. The Include Holes option is going to allow us to have these interior contours, like the wings and the beak and the eye, but if I unselect it, we have just our outer boundaries. It's important to have that selected for certain letters or designs like this. The Smoothing Level option is going to round off our corners the higher it is. So at a level of 60, it's pretty mild. If I drop it a bunch, it doesn't get too much sharper, but you might see a little bit more detail around the hair here on the bird. And if I jack it up to 100, our guy gets really, really smooth and we lose some detail. We don't even have our toes anymore. So I'll come back down to 60, which was the default. And because my minimum contour area is small enough to include these tiny features, I am happy, so I will click Next. In this final page, the design has pulled up. It has all of our borders that we selected, and we have a couple more options. The first one being contour offset. This is very useful if you don't want to cut directly on the border of what you are printing. Very helpful for things like stickers. Or if you're ever doing the opposite, for example, if you have a very thick black border around a sticker that you're printing and you'd like it to be a bit thinner, you can actually select this inset option, and then when I start to mess with the contour offset, it goes within. One thing to notice with offsets is as I increase this, when the cut lines overlap, like in the lettering, they just end up merging the cut lines into one large cut line. I don't need an offset for this though, so we're going to just leave this at 0 for the purpose of the provisional checklist. The clip artwork option will just get rid of the white background. You can use it if you like, but it won't affect us today. And then contour bleed, you can use it if you'd like, but it's not super helpful since we're not actually printing for the provisional checklist. It just adds that little edge effect, which stops you from getting the white background that you sometimes see with printing stickers. Somewhat like an inset, but instead of messing with your actual dimensions, you're just printing a little bit more ink to not see the white of the paper. But we're not doing stickers, we're doing vinyl. So I'll just leave it like this, default settings, and click finished. Now this is pulled into our design preview. And the first thing I'm going to do is actually disable these registration marks that we have generated on the outside. These generate by default whenever you do the print cut option because Leonardo Design Studio expects you to go in afterwards and then print this on sticker paper and then scan for these marks and cut relative to them. But we're not doing that today because we are using solid color vinyl. So with this selected, I went to this menu here on the right with artboard and cutting mat, and I am going to unselect print and cut job. This pulls me back to that 12 by 12 we had before, and now I just have my design, no registration marks, which is perfect. The first thing I want to do is separate this out into at least 2 colors of vinyl. So to do that, I'm going to right click it, go to the paths section, and ungroup the paths. Now we have everything separated, so you can see that I can pull away parts of the image. I'll just go through and delete the backgrounds for now. And then this pesky line earlier, I'll delete that as well. For the purposes of the checklist, there are 2 ways you can complete this. If you would like to have a floating sticker like this with no backing, then you can separate out the gear as well as the letters. And to select multiple things, you hold Shift while clicking things, and then when I drag these away, I would cut this out of one color of vinyl, and I would cut the bird out of another color. If you would like to do this and also have a single unifying backing layer, you can come in the bottom left here and use the Draw Shapes tool to give yourself a circle. Now, one thing I forgot to do before I separated these out is to resize them, but a handy little tool I can show you here. First of all, I'm right-clicking multiple paths, going to paths, and then welding them to combine them into one compound path. I'll do the same for the bird. In order to realign these so that I can reshape them together, if I have both selected by just clicking and dragging over both of them, in the top left, the Arrange tab can allow me to align objects, and if I click Center, and then I go back in, and I use the other center, now they are perfectly concentric, meaning I can resize this as wide as I want. For the purposes of the checklist, we will make this 4 inches wide. That'll make the outer one 4 inches wide and just scale the inner one by a proportional amount. So that's kind of what our sticker will look like in the end. At this stage, this is kind of all we need to do for vector preparation. The next thing you want to do is just lay these on the software where you are going to place your vinyl in real life. So this grid of 12 by 12 matches up 1-to-1 with the grid of 12 by 12 on the cutting mat. So I want to place my vinyl between the 0 and the 5 line on the cutting mat, so I'll make sure that my gear is there as well. And the bird will just go a little bit to the right of it. Yeah. So once your vectors are laid in the correct place, we are going to go to the Send Design tab in the top right. And here we have some options that are not completely relevant to us right now, but may be useful as you are working on other stickers. If you have something selected, for example, if I select this gear and then do Send Design, this first option for selected artwork only lights up, and this is just one of the quirky things about Leonardo Design Studio. You might have to click all artwork to actually get your bird to appear. Doing selected artwork only could be useful if you want to do this in components, but we're going to be doing everything at once, so I'll just make sure it's all artwork. Don't separate by color is also another interesting option. If you change the stroke color of one of your vectors, for example, if I click the bird, drag the color over to pink, and then click stroke, he turns pink. If I then click Send Design, it is by default going to separate this out into two different operations based on the color of the vector cut lines. If I click Don't Separate by Color, it will just assume that I want to do all of them together. For positioning options, the first one is move each color layer to the origin, and what that will do is, instead of cutting where I've placed them on the cutting mat, it will just move each of these colored objects to 0, 0 in the bottom left corner before cutting. This can be a useful feature if you're working on a particularly large design where you can't fit everything next to each other, but for our purposes, we actually want them to be spatially separated so that we can put two colors of vinyl on the mat. So instead of using that, I will say to use the current mat page location because I want it where I put it in the software. Now we'll go to Send, and we can see these two things. What you just saw was me sending with this Don't Separate by Color option enabled, and when I do that, all colors get merged into one operation like this, where when I click Send, everything would happen all at once. If instead I sent the design with this option disabled, what would happen is something quite similar, but instead of having an all colors option, Leonardo Design Studio has separated out my design into Dodger Blue and Deep Pink. What this lets me do is send two operations one after another rather than all at once. So if I have multiple pieces of vinyl I'm trying to cut into sequentially, I can do that. With this menu the way it is, when I have the ISGT and gear selected, when I click Send, Leonardo Design Studio will only cut the ISGT and gear. If I then click the bird, it would only cut the bird when I click Send. If instead you want to do everything all at once, again, what you would need to do is click Send Design and make sure that either everything is the same color so that it doesn't really matter, or click Don't Separate by Color so that when you click Send, everything is one operation. Then you would just click Send to Cutter and everything would cut at once. The only other thing in this menu you need to worry about is this Use Cutter's Settings option in the Machine tab. We actually set our blade force and speed on the machine, so by clicking this option, it will allow you to use the machine presets that we at Craftland have set up for you.
So once you've set up your file, you're going to move to the actual hardware section where we're going to be placing down our vinyl and cutting it according to the software and machine specifications. The first thing to do is notice where I've placed both of the vectors here. I've separated out the bird and the gear, so I need to make sure that my vinyl is in real life where the cut lines are in software. This grid matches up 1-to-1 with the build mat we have here. This thing is just a standard 12 by 12 inches. So for the gear, we are between the 0 and about the 4.5 line. So I'm going to take my tan vinyl here and I'm just going to put a little bit of glue in each corner and then lay it down in generally that area. You don't need a ton because the more you put on, the harder it's going to be to take off at the end. And just like that, it's positioned where it is in software. So yep, now my tan is in place. I'm going to do the similar thing with the red, and I'm going to put it to the right of the 5 line, it looks like, based on software. I've already pre-applied some glue to these corners, so I'll just lay that down. And that's what your vinyl setup should look about like. If you've positioned your vectors a little differently, obviously these are going to be in a different spot. Just make sure that this lines up with what you see on the screen. Next, I'm going to have to load this mat into the machine itself. So to do that, there is a black bar on the back of the machine, the back right here. And when I push this down, these rollers are going to pop up. And you can see that now the mat will slide under those rollers. With the bar raised, it clamps down and I can't insert the mat, but that's actually to apply some friction so that we can pull the mat around. So I'm going to drop the bar, and then on the upwards facing surface of the machine here, we've placed a bit of gray tape for you, and there's also the white indicator line on the left here, and I'm going to align the bottom left corner of the cutting mat with those two objects. So you can see the bottom of this black outline is lining up with the top of this gray tape, and the left edge is harder to see, but it is right on that white line. And with it in location, I just raise the bar again. Now to turn the machine on, it's just this white button here. I actually just turned it off, but you know, it's the same button to turn it on and off. So when it turns on, we will see the machine hum to life. So your mat's all set up now. Next thing to do is make sure that your cut settings are correct. That is going to be controlled on the machine itself, and it's going to be in this touchscreen panel over here. In here, we're going to click Cut Settings, and then we have a number of presets that you can use when you're working with our vinyl in studio. The first one that we're going to look at is Easy Weed. To change your preset, you click where the name is, and it pulls up all of the preloaded and custom-made presets for the Invention Studio. Easy Weed is the first one, so I'm just going to make sure that that's highlighted in gray, and then click Load. Within a preset, you can change your settings. So, for example, I can mess with the force here, increase it a bunch, or decrease it. And then it's no longer the exact preset, but that's actually fine. As long as you don't click this save button to the right of the name, you're completely fine. You won't override our settings. If you do click that, it will overwrite the settings. So I'm just going to make sure it's on the default 1020 for Easy Weed. And then to test that these settings are actually going to work for our vinyl, I'm going to need to traverse the cutter to a section where I'm not actually putting my design, and then run a test cut. To move, I'm going to use the 4 arrows on the control panel, and I am going to move to the right a bit. And then I'm actually going to pull the down arrow, because that'll pull the mat towards me, and I'll just pull this all the way to the top of the tan vinyl. This is about out of the way, so once my blade here, this red thing, is above a section that I don't super care about, I will click the T-shirt button in the bottom right corner of the control panel. That's our test cut button here. So it just ran a short operation where it cut out a square with a T-shirt icon and a circle. To test that that actually worked, I'm going to back the mat out a bunch so that I can actually see it. And I'm going to take one of my little pick tools and try and weed that design. A good test cut generally looks like being able to take out the square around the T-shirt and the circle within it without actually moving the T-shirt part of the test cut. That means that you're cutting deep enough that you're actually getting all the way through the vinyl. The one thing you want to watch for is to make sure that you're not cutting so deep that you're actually damaging the mat. So, you know, just try and peel up the backing as well and see if that comes. If it stays, you're good, because it means you didn't cut too deep. So, for the sake of example, I can peel away the back of the shirt like that. And I can remove that circle. And I have a nice little test cut there. So I'm now happy with my cut settings. It should be fine as long as you don't mess with it for our standard vinyls. So I will now traverse the mat back up into its normal position so that I can run the actual cut. So within your send menu, we are going to make sure that the use cutter settings option is selected. This is going to actually tell the machine, reference those presets that we just told it to use, actually use our Easy Weed. So as long as that's cut or selected, we are good. The rest of this you shouldn't really need to touch. Mirror could be useful to you if you're using heat transfer, but again, beyond the scope of this video. So, since everything is set up for me, I'm just going to go ahead and click the Send to Cutter, and we will see the machine cut out our design. It's going to ask me that the machine's ready. All right, and just like that, the machine is done. To get our vinyl back out, I'm going to use those same arrows I used before. I'm just going to hold the down arrow, and the mat has now completely backed out of the machine. At this point, I can turn off the machine, but it really doesn't matter. And I can remove my vinyl. The next step of this process is going to be to actually weed our little colors here. It's going to be almost impossible to see on camera, but I can verify that the cut lines did work. So I'm now going to peel away all the vinyl that I don't want, and I'm going to use transfer tape to layer these together. When you're doing your own design, you could optionally cut out a third color of just a big backing circle if you want it to look exactly like the model sticker on the wall, but technically speaking, this is all sticker, so you don't really need a backing. You could stick this on whatever. So I'll start here with the gear because it's the easier of the two. All I have to do is peel away this backing. My preferred method for this is to just take the pick and a little bit away from the design, pierce into the vinyl at an angle until it bubbles like that, so I can lift off the entire background. I'm being a little bit wasteful here because my piece of vinyl is much larger than my design. To avoid waste, what I could have done is cut off this top section and then save that for a small design or something. But most people don't use scraps that small anyway, so I'm not too fussed about it. And so now you can see all I have left are the letters and the gear. Next, I'll do a similar thing with the bird, but for this, I am going to peel away the background as well as some of the interior features of the bird. So I'll start doing the same thing I just did, getting the background away. And now I just have a little silhouette of the bird. And I need to remove the beak, the wing, and the outer circle of the eye as well as the eyebrow. And just like that, you can see the finished bird. This is a good example of why we want to run the test cut the way that we do. The interior of the eye here is just like the t-shirt in that I removed a big feature around it and I needed to make sure that it stayed in place. So making sure that the t-shirt could stay there while removing the big square made sure that this was going to stay in place. So now that I have my two individual layers, I just need to pick one of these up and layer it on the other to line them up. So to do that, I'm going to take some transfer tape and I'm going to pick up the bird and put it inside the gear. Our transfer tape roll is just between the tables here. And I'll peel this back and cut out a little square the size that I need. To use transfer tape, I will layer it over the bird, like so, and then using my thumb or a squeegee or something, I'm going to just apply some light pressure over all of my colored vinyl area. This ensures that you have enough pressure to actually lift the vinyl. If you don't do this step, you might find that the interior of the eye doesn't lift up properly. But assuming I've applied enough pressure, once I peel this, the whole design comes with it, and you see the eye comes as well. If that's not happening, just apply even more pressure, and eventually you should see it come up. Now this next step is somewhat precarious because you just kind of have to do it by eye, but I'm going to do my best to line up the kiwi in the gear as best I can, and that looks okay to me. So I'll just place it down. On this step, it's very important that you don't try and back out in the middle of it or something, because you might end up lifting one of your other features and misaligning things. So once it's in place, I will again do the same thing of applying a bunch of pressure over everything. My transfer tape is actually a little bit smaller than the edge of the tan here, but that should be fine. As long as I can lift part of it, the rest should come with it. And at this step, my sticker is essentially complete. There's a final step on the checklist that asks you to describe when you would trim the unneeded transfer tape or just lift and use the sticker. When I lift this off of the backing, like so, I get a sticker that is very unwieldy, because the moment I put this down on anything that vinyl wants to stick to, it's just going to be there permanently. So a reason that you would want to trim unneeded transfer tape or just trim the sticker is if you're not ready to use the sticker right now, like if you've made it to put on a water bottle later. And in those cases, you would just grab scissors and cut around the edge like so, and then you'd have a sticker. The primary reason to do that is because the transfer tape might be hanging off the edge, so you can see here where the transfer tape kind of leads up to the edge. That's something that I trimmed, and that would just be annoying in my backpack or something. It might stick to things, but I've trimmed it, so now it's not, and I can peel this whenever I need to. For the sake of example, I will now just peel this and put it on the back to show you how vinyl works. So I peel that up, I have my whole sticker on transfer tape, and then now, when I put it on something that is a little bit more adhesive, I apply more pressure again. Just got to make sure all that vinyl sticks. And this is the point of transfer tape. Now, when I remove this, everything should want to stay behind. I'm going to be a little bit more careful around the letters because those are thinner and tend to peel up more readily. But it looks like everything wants to stay for me today. And just like that, we have completed the vinyl sticker. Thanks for tuning in. I hope to see you around Craftland sometime soon.